When we think about words that we use to describe most cars, we think of things like sporty or luxurious or fast or fun. But there are very few cars that we get to use terms such as presence, theater, or event. This is one such car. This is a 2015 Porsche GT3, and on this episode, I'm going to show you why.
Seeing a regular Porsche 911 on the road is fairly common, and while they're attractive and unique looking cars in their own right, they don't hold a candle to this much more aggressive GT3. Maybe it's the big wing or the huge front air dam, but whatever it is, it demands your attention. And rightfully so, because under its skin lives a masterpiece of an engine, a 3.8 liter flat six that revs to 9,000 RPM.
What's the first thing that you do in a Porsche GT3 when you get access to it? And that, of course, is a launch. It's a brisk morning here, so this is probably going to be more of a burnout than a launch, but that sounds fun too. Couldn't be any easier. Oh, yeah. Oh my God. What the actual... So what just happened? Launching this car couldn't be any easier. Left foot on the brake, right foot on the gas. It revs up to 6,500 RPM and then drops the clutch. At which point you go spinning tires if your tires are cold like mine, and just absolutely rock it off all the way to 9,000 RPM. This thing is insane. I just can't. So all the magic happens between 8 and 9,000 RPM. There's really not that many cars that rev high, even to 8,000 RPM, but to have something that revs to 9 in this flat six configuration that is so smooth and makes 475 horsepower, this thing is nuts. The throttle response is... Oh, Porsche, you just do it so well. This car just responds so quickly, and of course you can thank the fact that it's naturally aspirated. There's no turbos messing anything up here. Love turbos, but in this application it's so lovely. There's this weird change in like intake note at 4,000 RPM. I don't think it's like a VTEC type situation, but there's clearly something like crossing over in the intake track, and it makes a lovely, lovely noise. The engine is just so smooth. I mentioned that before, and I guess it has to be smooth if you're gonna rev to 9,000 RPM, because otherwise it would just disintegrate, right? Now, of course, the engine is really what makes this car so special. But this is a Porsche GT3, meaning this is their track car. So how is the suspension? Just as good. It's firm, but it's everything you would expect from a track car as far as firmness. And it's surprisingly not abusive on these crappy Ohio roads, which is a surprise. The direction change, oh. If you hit a bump, it just boom, boom, like One hit for the bump, and then you're stabilized. Oh, this is so good. It does have this button here for a firmer suspension. I've pressed it a couple times, and I don't really notice that much of a difference. Maybe you would notice more of a difference on the track or something. The way the thing is out of the box without this suspension button on is perfection. I mean, I hate to use that term because no car is perfect, but my gosh, like everything so far with this thing. That was 7,000 RPM. That was 7,000 RPM. I had 2,000 RPM more to go. Oh! A quick 10-second interruption for you guys. Next week, we're gonna put the Sharkworks exhaust on this GT3, so make sure you're hitting the subscribe button and ringing the bell. But how about the steering? There's so much talk about electric power steering, sucking and stuff, and that is a thing for a lot of cars. Think about BMW. BMW, when they switched to electric power steering, awful compared to their old stuff, but honestly, like, if you didn't tell me, I wouldn't know this is electric power steering. I mean, there's still so much feedback coming through this wheel. I know what the tires are doing. I can feel when they break away. I can feel uneven spots in the road. It's insanely accurate, and it's everything you would expect from Porsche to just get right. Oh, this car. I mean, I'm in a rear engine car with 475 horsepower just whipping this road, and it's a little damp. Like, you should not be able to do this. In an old Porsche, you better have some skill to get this done. And look at me. I'm the guy famous for sticking my FRS into a ditch, and I haven't crashed yet. It's this rear steer in this car really stabilizes this thing, and you know, to a certain extent doesn't really make it feel like traditional 911s because you don't feel the weight in the back that much. It just makes the car balance so well, and that's the beauty part about this thing, that it really just dances with you and it responds to corrections for you. If you're hooning in a corner and you go in too fast, it will understeer a little bit, but if you let off, it will lift and it will rotate the car. I mean, of course we're gonna do that again. This car, man. The seating position is so good as well. Really tight corner here. How does this car put this power down? I mean, the power band is so linear, so that's nice. You don't get hit with like a whole bunch of torque like you do in turbo cars. But the seating position of this car, I'm so low. I'm in these 918 carbon bucket seats. Like, come on, this is crazy. Seems kind of like overkill maybe for the street, but they fit me perfectly. I'm 6'1", 170. And you really can't beat them. They are manual, and a $150,000 car is pretty hilarious. But who cares? They adjust up and down electronically, so they can raise you up and down electronically, but backwards and forwards, that's on you. And then they don't recline because they're bucket seats. So the owner of this car is a large fellow, not a fat man, but like a big dude. And he put these sort of seat risers in here that will adjust the angle of the seat so he's not so like far forward. It was fine for me stock. It's fine for me like this. I can get this wheel so far out and get it nice and close to my body There is no shifter, but if there was, it would be, my hand would be awfully close to the wheel. And we could talk a little bit more about that later. The fact that this is an automatic car in a fun track toy. Is that sacrilege? I don't know. Right now, I do not care because this PDK is so good. The gauges are great. They're analog. I love it. Digital gauges can be cool, but man, there's just something, especially in this car, about an analog tack gauge that's just dead center. That's really all you care about when you're driving, right? Am I at that 9,000 RPM rev limit yet? And it's so hard to know without looking because every fiber in your body is telling you to shift. Even at like 8,000 RPM, you're sure that you're at the red line. It's friggin' nuts, man. Now you have buttons down here. Like there's a nose lift button, which is really cool. This suspension and the car itself is very, very low. So getting in and out of driveways is sketchy, but if you have nose lift, makes a huge difference and is such a nice option to have on this car. It's really quick. You can do it at a relatively high speed. I think it works up to 30, 35 miles an hour. And then you can also hit this binocular button here and make the exhaust loud. What you want to do? That last bit from 8 to 9 every time. Visibility is pretty good, although the wing makes the rear window mostly worthless. And that's honestly probably for the best, because if you could see behind you, you could see the cars behind you, you would just see people saying, look at this dickbag in a Porsche. But f*** 'em.
We'll talk a little bit more about value here in a second, but one thing I thought that was pretty cool about this car is the owner flew from Ohio to Colorado to buy it. Before driving back, he got the car inspected and then drove it up Pikes Peak. He wanted to give a shout out to Blue Chip in Denver for doing the PPI. He said they were super thorough and helped him out on short notice. So check out bluechipfleet.com for your service or storage needs in Denver, Colorado.
What are the downsides to a GT3? Well, there's really not much. Guys, I really am racking my brain to think of what I have a problem with. Would I like it to be slightly smaller? Yes. But it's not really that bad. Would I like it to have a manual transmission? Yeah, but this PDK is incredible. The launch I did back there, the lightning quick shifts. If you're talking strict track car, you want the ultimate lap times and stuff. Yeah, I mean, they obviously brought back the manual in the later runs of this generation, which is really good, but PDK doesn't leave me a lot to be desired. So, I mean, this car, guys, is just absolute perfection. And when you think about a car that can cost $100,000, it's hard to think about it in the sense of being a good value, right? To think of a car that's $100,000, almost the price of a house, to be a good value, you're like, oh, no. I really struggle with that. But you could buy one of these lightly depreciated like this one for, a little over $100,000. And the question is, how much is it going to depreciate for the next year or two? You could own it for a year or two, and there's no way it's going to depreciate more than $10,000, right? Couple that with the fact that when these came out, they started to catch fire, which is a concern, but Porsche addressed that, and they backed these cars, the engines, regardless of what happens with them, to 100,000 miles or 10 years. So, you know, if something does go wrong, especially with a super expensive engine, it's covered. Oh, by the way, this car has rear steer, which is amazing. Low speed and high speed. But if your engine does break, it's covered for 10 years, 100,000 miles. So if you have the ability to park $100,000 or just even finance $100,000, I mean, maybe don't finance the whole thing, put a decent chunk of change down. But if you can afford the payments, I don't really think you're gonna lose on this car. It will depreciate a little bit, but this thing is just such an icon and something that is going away. These naturally aspirated, high revving engines, like we're in an era of emissions and turbochargers and stuff. This is a keeper, of course. So people are gonna want this long term. I think the owner who has recently purchased this for a little over 100 grand is gonna do quite well if he owns this car for a couple years. And you know, you basically get to own an amazing car for Camry money in depreciation, in my opinion. So this thing is absolutely exceeded my expectations. They say don't meet your heroes, and I was quite worried about that. Since this car came out, I've been obsessed with wanting to own or drive one, and it is everything I have wanted and more. And that's not often that you can say with such iconic cars. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I love this car. EatSleepDrive TV on Instagram. I'm speechless. I'm not often speechless, but there's nothing else to say with this car. It's virtually perfect. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Comment on the video. Let me know what you think about this thing, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.